Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Swing of Things, Season 2. It's great to be back. Today's episode is sponsored by Concept 2, our wonderful partners who generously supply equipment for our national team. We've made some changes, refreshed our content, and added a few regular segments to the show. Each episode will be joined by our head of high performance, Josie Verdonskott, for a new segment where he'll share a quick update on what's happening with our high performance athletes. And from across the pond, our friends at Row 360, editors Tom Ransley and Benedict Tufnell, will share their international rowing world insights. And we want to hear from you too. We've created a new mailbag for you, our listeners. So please share your thoughts, feedback, and any questions you might have. The email is theswingofthings@usrowing.org. We're going to kick off today's episode with a mentor of mine from when I was at Row New York. Sammy Pullett-Zehner is a founder of Arbor Rising, an organization that funds and supports promising social entrepreneurs so they can grow their ideas into sustainable forces for change. I asked Sammy to join me for a conversation about US Rowing's newly launched strategic plan, why we created the plan, and what's ahead. Without further ado, let's get started on Season 2. First, we welcome Sammy Pullett-Zehner. Hi, Sammy. It's such a treat to see you.
Amanda, it's a pleasure seeing you. Thanks for including me in this.
We first thought of you as someone to have this conversation with because we actually go way back now, from early days of Row New York. You know, I talked a little bit about you in the intro, but that you and Scott Thomas were the founding Arbor brothers, now Arbor Rising. And I remember coming to you early years of Row New York for what I thought would just be a grant, but then realized it came with consulting. And I remember thinking, well, that's okay. I can put up with some consulting if they give us a lot of money. And turns out it was not only such meaningful financial support, but also, I mean, the most wisdom one could have ever asked for as a nonprofit leader. So I feel forever indebted to you and Scott for all of that support, and so glad that you're bringing your wisdom and experience with nonprofit leadership, management, consulting to this conversation.
Yeah, wow, no pressure, right, Amanda? All right, thank you. Well, first of all, it's really exciting to see you in this role. Because we've heard about US Rowing through you over the last decade plus, and to review the plan and chat about it with you a little bit is inspiring, because this is a sport that is ripe for growth and has some real opportunities. And so getting a little peek at your vision is exciting, and I know the whole sport and frankly the country will benefit from it.
Thank you. Yeah. So I started in this job just over 2 years ago, and really in the first year was COVID, a delayed Olympics. I mean, there was a lot going on. And so we were trying to reopen the sport as the country was reopening, and trying to just sort of sort how we were going to function as an organization, and, put systems and staffing in place. And I always refer to it as like get fit. We needed to get off the couch and get fit. And so we did that, and we hired some great people, and we put systems and structure in place. And so that was sort of, we kind of then looked around and realized, oh, this is really good. But we don't have a plan for the sport and the organization. And we have so many competing priorities. We have over 70,000 individual members, 1,400 clubs or organizational members, I should say. And, they have different wants and needs and interests within the sport. And, I think so many of us on this team and the board too, like we're pleasers, right? We want to deliver. But that requires making choices about the pathway, right? And so that's why we sat down and put together this roadmap. These are the things we are going to prioritize. These are the things that we are going to care most about over the next 3 years. So it might be helpful if I actually talk a little bit about the plan. I could boil it down to 5 points, Sammy. And the first is that We want to lower the economic barriers to entry of our sport. We want to make the sport more accessible, right? For too long, this incredible sport has just not had, open boathouse doors in a lot of ways. We always reference, let's open the boathouse doors and make sure that people feel welcomed in the sport and seen in the sport and celebrated in the sport. And there's a lot we can do to be helpful there. We definitely want to make our sport more successful at the highest level. So that means winning medals at the Olympics. That means a real investment in high performance in the pipeline, in finding the best talent, keeping the best talent, taking care of the best talent, having incredible coaches and resources for our national team athletes, and then finding success on the podium there. We also want to make sure that we're delivering value to our members, right? So much of what we heard in the feedback from members was, I don't know what I get for being a member of US Rowing. So for us, it's really important that our members feel that we're reinvesting in them, whether they're individual members or they're organizational members, with resources, whether it's coaching education, it's safety. I think the biggest part of the plan that people will read about and say, aha, okay, I can see how this helps me, is this self-service model that we're building out. So any resource you need as a rower or rowing organization, you can find, whether you need to hire a coach, you need to learn about coaching, you have a question about safety, you have a question about accounting for your club, you have a question about fundraising. We're really there to build up these, muscles in these members and member organizations. So Sammy, and be honest here, we go way back. Like, what do you worry most about when you hear, a CEO or an executive director spout off on, these are all the things we're going to do? Like, what goes through your head?
So I'll answer that, Amanda, if that's okay. First, broadly, and then take it down to the level of to the priorities that you just described, because I think that to some degree they are related. Which is, lots of times, I think the word strategic plan is very overused, and it means different things to different people. And to me, what I'm looking for in understanding the strategic plan broadly is, do I understand the elements? Do those elements, will that lead to better outcomes for the organization if implemented well? And then do I think it's plausible that those things those priorities could turn into well-implemented ideas, which would then turn into outcomes? And then I want to see the money part. Okay, great. What will it actually take to get there? And do we have a plan to either raise enough money or earn enough income to make this plan feasible in the timeline that is created here? So that's, broadly speaking, how I approach these things. In the elements and priorities that you just laid out, Amanda, for me, they all make great sense. They sound lovely. They hang together. And frankly, I am most impressed with the concept and the tie between trying to get really fast boats, which I think we all agree is one of the very biggest primary goals of U.S. rowing, is to win medals in Olympics, both men and women, and Paralympics too. And that the way to do that, as we have seen other countries do, and as we've seen other sports do, is build the base. And that means working with kids that are younger. That means expanding access to the sport. That means engaging them. And so the concept of being fun, or lowering the economic barriers, or making the sport more welcoming, all those things contribute to getting faster boats in the long run. Not tomorrow, not 3 years from now, not in Paris, but not even in Los Angeles probably, but down the line, that is going to have a major impact. That's how you build a sport. I'm not a sports expert, so, everyone here should take that with a grain of salt, but it makes some sense. And so what I like about this plan is that the elements are tied together and are tied to both those incredible outcomes that happen at the individual level that we described, at the membership level that I know you guys are really trying to focus on, and then of course at the sport and the country as a whole. So I like those elements. From our conversation earlier, it sounds like you guys are really building the plan, fundraising wise and financially, to make this thing go. That to me is like the big open question, right? These are all lovely things, and the thing that I worry about typically is the money piece. Period. Knowing that is going to be addressed over the course of the next couple of months internally, and that what you've shared with me earlier is that you're building a board that is comprised of a lot of people who are resource gatherers and also able to contribute financially at a significant level themselves, and that is going to be a great boost to get this plan off the ground. Once the fundraising elements are in place, the next question I ask myself is, what do we think about leadership? Does leadership have the focus and the capabilities to, frankly, to achieve a series of priorities that are above and beyond what are currently being done? And that's hard. That's a hard thing. But my experience with you, Amanda, suggests that that the leadership is not a major question here.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, and I think ideas are cheap, right? It's easy to it's easy to throw a lot of things on paper, and the harder part, so much of it is clarity of planning, and I think building trust, right? I think there's been reputational repair work, frankly, that's been a part of being in this role, that we will do the things we say we're going to do, and that we'll be responsive and transparent as a national governing body. And that takes time, right? That isn't a switch, I have learned. It's not a switch you can flip on. And yeah, I'm incredibly excited about the US Rowing Foundation that we've created. It's being led by Bill McNabb, who, has tremendous leadership ability. He's attracted so many strong people to this group who share this vision for making rowing more accessible and faster. And it's interesting because some people will say, you should really just focus on the grassroots and don't worry about the national team. And some people will say, just worry about the national team and don't worry about the grassroots, or making the sport accessible. And I feel so strongly that the two should be married. And the strength of one depends on the strength of the other. And I think over time, we'll be able to show that to be true, because we are broadening the pipeline. We are welcoming more people into the sport. We're helping member organizations welcome more people into the sport and keep them in the sport. And, finding resources to keep people in the sport who wouldn't, be able to continue rowing at an elite level because they have to get jobs, right? And they need to focus on building careers. So really identifying those barriers and working to take them down so we can keep people going and support them and make fast boats.
Amanda, I do have another question based upon what you were just sharing in this concept of member services, right? I heard you say there's some repair work to be done, and now there's also a whole lot of value that members are aiming to get out of their membership. And I have sat on the board of a membership-based organization in the past, and one of the things that we constantly wrestled with was, how do you balance the needs of members who are separate organizations, right? Over whom you have no control, nor would you want that. But you have some people that want a lot and need a lot of support, and frankly will perhaps demand it the more that you offer it. With the larger goals that the organization has around building the sport and helping make the sport be as fast as possible. So how do you balance those priorities, which sometimes could be competing with each other?
I think sometimes they can feel like they're competing with one another, but I think, Sammy, if we do it right, they're actually helping one another. So, we hear a lot from member organizations, and some, everyone wants different things, but there are a lot of commonalities, right? And one of them is definitely the desire for more help with finding and retaining coaches. And I think coaches they're the quiet linchpin here, right? In that we don't have the sport without them. And the stronger they are, the more talented they are, the happier they are, the better off the sport is, right? And they are the keepers of culture. They're the keepers of safety on the water and off. They recruit athletes, they retain athletes, they drive the culture of the sport and the culture of teams. So the more we can help those individuals stay in the sport, find the sport, stay in these roles, the better off we all are. So that's one example of where we will invest in this plan.
Be leaning in, yeah. And listen, it all makes sense. It all sounds good. It sounds to some degree like it is everything, right? So my question back to you then is, if you had an incremental dollar and you could put it towards, but you only had one, and you really would like to have three, right? You'd like to invest in coaches, which means training and retention or paying coaches more, or you could put that into the national team and not just recruiting but training, or you could put that dollar into member services and trying to provide an extra bit of support to a member who's got some needs. How do you make that decision?
Yeah. And I mean, you're just boiling it down to what this is all about, right? I remember a million years ago, a program officer from another foundation asked me a question. I don't remember the context exactly, but she had asked, do you care about this piece? And I said, oh yeah, we really do care about this piece of the program. And she said, well, why don't I see it in the budget anywhere? And that has stuck with me forever because, you can't say you care about something if you're not actually putting any resources towards it. But I'll say, I think what a lot of people don't realize is the really large gap that's there in terms of high performance budget. We receive a generous grant of $1.9 million this year from the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee to support the national team. But the direct costs are $4.5 million. So yeah. Did you know that?
That is not the way China does it, is it?
Oh, no, I don't think there is a limit there. I think it's whatever they need. So, it is a very, Yosi, to his credit, I mean, that man is a genius, and he is so passionate about what he does running the high performance program. And he has to be thoughtful about every single dollar and where it goes, because the rest of that gap is raised through the foundation and fundraising, through grants. But it is, it's a big lift to bring that money in. The NGB, which is national governing body, I talk to CEOs from different sports all the time, and it's a constant struggle to raise the budget, to bring in that budget every year.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds like the U.S. model is fairly unique and comes with some flexibility, perhaps, but also some real responsibility to fundraise in order to create competitive national teams.
Yeah. So, Sammy, I so appreciate the time you're taking to just talk about this plan, and I'm sure it won't be the only conversation we have. But I'm wondering, how do you think we'll know if we're being successful? Like, how do you think, what's advice you have as we head into actually implementing this plan?
It's a great question. It's an important one to ask yourselves. And unlike very specific organizations, especially direct service ones, for an organization like USRowing, I kind of have a two-part answer. One is that we're really not going to know the success of this plan for 10, 15, 20 years, probably, right? And so it's really important to have a vision for what success for the sport looks like in terms of, not necessarily in terms of number of clubs and super countable things, but in terms of where you want the sport to be 20 years from now. And is these next 3 years really setting the organization and the sport on a path to achieving that long-term vision. That's the first thing. The second thing then is much more direct, much more tactical, much more on the ground around the plan itself, which is, I know that you have created some metrics for each of those 5 priorities that you laid out earlier. And so, of course, the main thing 3 years from now to ask ourselves is, were those metrics hit? Why or why not? It's obviously much more interesting to help growing the sport based upon the answers to the why or why not those things were hit. But obviously we need the data to figure that out. For things like Olympic medals, that's easy, right? That's countable, and we've got some goals, and let's see how we do against them. On membership, that's also fairly easy. The number of members you've had, and whether that membership is growing, and then the total number of members of rowers per membership organization. We can see kind of the growth of the sport that way. So there are some things that are fairly countable. The sense of belonging, the sense of inclusion, those things are a little bit less easy to count, but I know you guys are working on some creative metrics around that, and so measuring against those will be great. And then of course the main thing is, and then what did that cost? Because the one element that lots of organizations fail to do is to not just correlate the work that was done with whether or not you hit your budget, but what elements which of the priorities or which elements of your programming drive the most outcomes on a cost per outcome basis. Meaning, how much did it cost you guys to deliver that particular outcome or to move a particular initiative forward? And I think most organizations find, after analyzing that after some time, that there are 1 or 2 surprises in there. That it turns out that membership, providing value to members is like way cheaper than you expected, and so therefore you can actually grow the sport much faster by investing in that direction. For example, I don't know that to be true, but that's just as an example. So, thinking about the 20-year vision and how this plan fits into it, and then breaking down each of the priorities into their KPIs or their metrics, seeing that, and then measuring that against the dollars and what it costs to deliver those outcomes on an initiative by initiative basis.
That's extremely helpful. And I wonder if you guys have thought about taking on a national organization. Putting you on the spot.
Scott and me in a boat first and see if we stay upright. That'll be the first step.
Yeah, we'll put you in a boat. Really, seriously. Thank you for your wisdom and your time, and I look forward to keeping you updated on how we're doing.
Oh, Amanda, I'm really excited to be participating in this way, and your leadership is just truly inspiring. I'm excited to be on the sidelines watching it happen.
Hi there. You're listening to The Swing of Things with Amanda Krause. Before we hand back to Amanda, we thought we'd take this opportunity to introduce ourselves. My name's Ben Tufnell.
And I'm Tom Ransley, and we're the chief editors of Row 360, a global independent row magazine. So Ben, how are we going to describe ourselves?
Well, Tom Ransley here is not only an Olympic gold and bronze medalist from the Great Britain Men's 8 in London and Rio. He's also an extremely accomplished writer and journalist. He's written for national broadsheets including The Telegraph, The Guardian. I think he's even a 2-time world champion as well. So there you go. What more can I say?
That's true, yeah. Thank you very much. It's very kind. And Ben here is my esteemed colleague. He was handling the whole show solo for Row 360 for many years before I joined the team. And he's also gone on to great things. He shoots for World Rowing. He's the official World Rowing photographer, the official boat race photographer, as well as US Rowing and Row 360. So, the best in the business.
Well, that's enough about us. So up until now, we've been sort of behind the scenes on this podcast. So we thought for season 2 we'd try something a bit different. So bear with us. But we're going to be bringing you updates from around the world as we follow the international racing circuit. We're lucky enough to be there on the ground at most of the World Rowing events, if not all of the World Rowing events, I think, this year. So we're going to do our best to talk a little about those in a hopefully succinct and interesting way.
Interesting you say on the ground, because I think we pretty much had to pick ourselves up off the floorboards after the 6-day Henley Royal Regatta. the second time it's been a 6-day event. There's plenty to cover, some incredible races. Even though the US national team weren't there this year, there are still some incredible American crews. In the junior women's eights, Winter Park crew made it through to the semi-final. Didn't quite make it through, but it did leave an all-American final in the junior women's eight between Greenwich crew, who beat Deerfield Academy. And also some incredible collegiate performances from the likes of Syracuse and University of Washington.
So that was Henley last week. Then, so tomorrow we're heading to Lucerne. It's a small US national team racing in Lucerne, just 3 lightweight single scullers, I believe. But there's an interesting story of one of them.
Yeah, that's right. So Jamie Copus, he's an ex-GB internationals he represented Great Britain for over 10 years, actually. But he's been trialling for the US national team.
Turns out he has a US passport.
Right, so he's Chicago born, and he's cashed that dual citizenship in, and yeah, he's going to make his debut in Lucerne Regatta next week in the lightweight men's single.
Racing for the US.
Yeah.
And he just also won Henley last week in a British University boat, Oxford Brookes, in the... It's called the Ladies' Plate. It's one of the peculiarities of Henley. It's actually the men's intermediate eights event. So we just saw him winning the bow seat for Brooks there, and now he's headed off to Switzerland, where he'll be racing for the US.
Yep. So jumping from one of the biggest boat class down to the smallest boat class.
Yeah. And that was also a heavyweight category that he was racing in Henley. But the US team will be back in full force at the World Championships in September, which is going to be a particularly high-pressure event.
Yeah, it's a tough one this year. It's the first opportunity that international teams have of qualifying for next year's Olympics. So Olympic qualification places up for grabs.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they do out there. And I know that the US had, it seemed like a very strong performance in World Cup 2 just a couple of weeks ago. They seem to be on the podium featuring quite heavily. It seems to be in a good place under Yossi's leadership.
Which in fact neatly brings us to the next part of the show. In addition to these regular updates from Tom and I from across the pond, every episode Amanda will be catching up with Yossi, who is the US team's Chief High Performance Officer, to hear more about what he and the national team have been up to. So that's enough from us. We'll be back in the next episode, but for now, let's hear from Yossi as he catches up with Amanda.
Goodbye.
Hi, Yossi. Welcome back.
Hey, Amanda.
I feel better when you're in this country.
I feel better when I'm in the country because at least I've got the feeling that I get the full experience and actually that I can do the things that we are supposed to be doing right now, which is building a team.
Yeah. So you're back from Italy, World Cup 2. How did it go?
It's always a World Cup, so it's easy to say, yeah, it was great, etc. But if I look from a distance and just check our results, I think we did pretty well. Obviously, not everybody is there, but if you look at the competition, there was medalists in all the events. We participated mainly with the small boats, and being in 8 different Olympic events in the finals, medaling in 7 Olympic events means that, just to my understanding, I think we are on track to qualify the number of boats that we want to qualify, which would be a number more or less equal to Tokyo, or maybe a little bit more. And we are on track if we look at the results, because it's obvious that it will be really hard to replicate 7 medals at Worlds, but that's not the ambition. Just have light women's double, women's 4, women's double, men's 4, all up there with the best. Gives me a good feeling for now. And we know that, core business for many Americans, the 8s weren't there. And it makes sense that the 8s weren't there because we are going to select them right after this. But, having that quality in the small boats and knowing that there's still a lot of people around that we didn't take on the tour, I'm feeling good about that.
And who wasn't there who we'll see in September?
Do you want all the names or?
Just the countries.
Well, big players that weren't there would be the Dutch, Romania, and then it differs a little bit per event. But for the big teams, it was probably the Dutch and Romania that were missing. Mm-hmm. And then in individual events, the men's double of Croatia wasn't there, etc. Mm-hmm. So you can make a nice list. However, a lot of people were there, mm-hmm. and I've got this simple method, and that is like this: to qualify on a World Cup like this, you have to be on the podium. So I would say we're on track for 7 boats. So I think it's a matter of prioritizing, but the way we're doing it right now seems to work. And obviously you can fire me at the end of the season if I'm totally wrong, but I am pretty sure that you're not going to do that, because according to me, we are right at track and maybe a little bit ahead of what we could expect.
I know there was a lot of excitement here. Last time men's double medaled internationally, was that 86?
Well, I know that there was a beautiful gold medal in 84 with a nice story behind it. Brett Lewis sold at Lake Casitas. And there was also a pretty good performance at the Olympics in Athens 2004. But from then on, it's a very deep search to find the results.
Yeah.
So that's good.
So what happens now?
What happens now? We get back to work, which means that right now we've started today. We've started selection camp. Invited were a lot of people, but it includes returning athletes from last year Worlds who didn't make the first cut for the selection camp to go to Europe. And obviously also people that just graduated or finished school and will get a shot at competing for the 8. So timing wise, it makes sense to have this camp now. And timing wise, it's perfect because the next 3 weeks we will decide about the setups for the rest of the boats that are not selected yet. But that means that we still will have a pretty decent 8-week preparation for World Championships, topping it off with a camp in Italy before we go to Serbia, and then hopefully with a beautiful finish in Serbia and a good start of 2024. By the way, qualified right now, it's obvious, NSR boat, women's single, qualified men's double and women's pair.
Mm-hmm.
But today we decided straight 4 that raced, the women's straight 4 that raced in Europe will stay together. So that's the 4th boat that is set.
That's exciting.
This week we will decide the final setup for the men's 4, beginning next week for the light women's double, which means that from then on, it's pretty clear. Then we focus on the big boats, on the 8s and on the quads. So in the process, we're already trying to finalize as many boats as we can in order to not distribute the talent over every boat, but first deciding our best boats and then next steps, building the big boats, quads and the 8s.
Exciting. Well, thank you for the update, Josi.
Very welcome. It's always nice to speak to you.
You too. I'll talk to you soon.
Hope to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye. And that's all for this episode of The Swing of Things. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Sammy, Josi, and the Row 360 team. In the next episode, I'm joined by my colleagues from US Rowing, Rich Cacioppo and Chris Furlow, who helped shape program design, and we'll talk more specifically about the online learning platform and resources that are a cornerstone of the strategic plan. Don't forget to drop us a message using our email address, theswingofthings@usrowing.org. And remember to like, share, and follow from wherever you get your podcasts. It helps others to find us. Thank you.